import surge and dumping, and 5 demand-side interventions. Therefore, the press briefing this morning will provide an update on progress on these key elements. With regards to continued engagements with the US to secure a deal and reduce the tariffs, Cabinet has approved that South Africa submits a revised offer as a basis for negotiations with the US. The new offer builds on the previous offer submitted in May 2025. The new offer substantively responds to the issues the US has raised in the 2025 National Trade Estimates Report. South Africa has already addressed sanitary and phytosanitary measures in compliance with the biosecurity protocols affecting poultry. In this regard, South Africa granted market access under the conditional self-ban and self-lifting system. This will ensure that the US is able to leverage the tariff rate quota of 72,000 tons already agreed in 2026. Secondly, with regards to blueberries, we've granted market access for states that are free of fruit fly and agreed to mitigation measures with those states with fruit fly. And also with regards to pork, in this regard, it is open, subject to the biosecurity requirements. Consequently, the USA-Africa Trade Desk has informed us that it will be shipping containers of poultry and pork to South Africa in 2 weeks' time, which is testimony that these issues have been resolved. The shipments will come from the states of Georgia, Mississippi, California, North Carolina, and Alabama through the port of New Orleans in Louisiana, Savannah in Georgia, and Norfolk in Virginia. Other significant requests from the US was that South Africa consider reducing tariffs as a way to address the deficit and tariff disparity with the European Union due to the SADC-EU Economic Partnership Agreement. South Africa continues consultations will identify specific lines to respond to this request. On the economic response package, Cabinet has endorsed the economic response package that includes the establishment of an export desk, which serves as a direct point of contact for affected companies. Since being operational, thus far, 23 companies have utilized the export support desk and were accordingly assisted. In addition to queries processed, engagements were also initiated. More than 54 South African exports, elements of an economic response package, and issues linked to market diversification. Measures to assist companies to absorb the tariffs and facilitate long-term resilience and growth strategies to protect jobs that the Export and Competitiveness Support Program will include a working capital facility and plant and equipment facility to address short to medium-term needs across all industries. Furthermore, working with the Department of Employment and Labor on measures to mitigate job losses using existing instruments within its entities that can be adjusted to respond to the current challenges has already started. And following consultations with the Competition Commission, a block exemption for exporters has been introduced to enable collaboration and coordination amongst competitors. A draft block exemption will be published by the end of this week so that the process can be concluded expeditiously, and information would be available on the DTIC website. With regards to diversification of exports to alternate markets, the recent imposition of the 30% unilateral tariffs by the US on our exports is a significant policy shift that necessitates a clear and decisive response. South Africa has accelerated its diversification efforts of export markets and enhanced competitiveness to mitigate the economic impact of losing preferential trade preferential trade access. The diversification is a strategic imperative to ensure better resilience of our economy to economic shocks. This is not a plan B, it is a plan A for long-term resilience and competitiveness. We are committed to strengthening our relationship, particularly under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, to build regional resilience. We will continue to work with the FCFTA and other countries as we ensure that we consolidate partnerships, including our European partners, towards enhancing our trade and investment relations in a manner that unlocks sustainable growth and development and entrenches South Africa in new supply chains. We're looking at Asia, including Japan, Vietnam, and Thailand, the Middle East, and India. We are pursuing these markets because we see growing demand, existing negotiations, and a positive reception to South African products. This is not just about trade numbers. It is directly linked to job protection. Diversification is about protecting rural livelihoods and sustainable agricultural growth for our people. To achieve this, government is deploying dedicated infrastructure for market expansion, including trade and agricultural attaches, increased export certification capacity, and a concerted effort to align our biosecurity standards with the requirements of these new markets. A high-level negotiating team, including both the DTIC and the Department of Agriculture, has been identified and is ready to engage the US towards a mutually beneficial agreement. Our goal is to demonstrate that South African exports do not pose a threat to US industries and that our trade relationship is in fact complementary. While the US is our third largest trading partner after the EU and China, South Africa is the 43rd export destination for the US and accounts for 0.25% of total US imports and is therefore not a threat to US production. Excuse me. Furthermore, the US market accounts for about 4% of our total agricultural exports, or 9.8 billion rand of our total agricultural exports, an increase of 104% from 2018. Government is going to do everything possible to keep the American market open for our goods. We will at the same time accelerate our efforts to diversify markets and build on the efforts we have put in place to ensure predictability in trade and leverage all our existing partnerships to secure markets of our products. With regards to trade defense and protecting domestic industry against import surge and dumping, the tariffs imposed by the US do not apply to South Africa only. They also affect over 130 trading partners with whom American consumers and producers interact. In this regard, many of the orders destined for that nation that now face prohibitive restrictions to enter that market will seek out other outlets for such production. Furthermore, chronic overcapacity observed in the world market for key product markets like steel, glass, subsidized agricultural products, solar, and automotive vehicles will make this surge increasingly harmful, or rather, no, incessantly harmful for our domestic industries. As such, South Africa stands ready to make use of its trade remedy measures to safeguard and protect its industry within the prevailing agreements of the WTO. This will involve consideration and on the balance of evidence, the use of anti-dumping, anti-subsidy, and safeguard measures to protect domestic industry, which may be affected by such trade deflection and or diversion. Excuse me. And with regards to demand-side interventions to leverage on buying power by local consumers, private sector and government, proudly South Africa will intensify outreach with corporates and retailers through its online store and market access program or platform, which is a procurement tool targeted at the private sector to support increased domestic sales of products, with future export capability of the online platform to be used to assist with export market diversification. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I must apologize. It was a rather long statement, and I know sometimes the voice doesn't comply. But you made it through. Thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to start a round of questions now. I'm going to take 4 questions. Colleagues who are behind the cameras, you are at a disadvantage. I'm not able to see you, so if you're able to come forward, I can acknowledge you. Let me start on that side of the room. Please remember your number. I don't remember colleagues' names. My apologies. I will eventually. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you.
Lifting system was already in place a few months ago, and sorry, for the poultry. And then for the pork, it's saying the same requirements are still there. So what's changed in this offer that you think will tempt the U.S.?
Hi, I'm Julie Bourdin from AFP News Agency. I'd like to know if you have any new information regarding the U.S. Requirements on South Africa's domestic policy. Have they made any new statements or anything to the regard of BEE or any of these issues?
Oh, hi. Sorry, Nick Wilson from News 24. My question, have the US actually been in contact with DTIC and agriculture this past week? Because sometimes it seems like the trade guys might be working with us, but it almost seems like President Trump has a totally different agenda. Any kind of color on that would be great. Thank you.
And Dogozo Kumalo from Newsroom Africa. 2 questions. If Minister Dow could please just unpack a little bit more around the support desk, those 29 exporters and 53, I think I missed a little bit there. And what industries specifically are they in and the type of support that they were given? And do we have a monetary value yet of the value of the support package and where exactly it will be streamlined to first? And then a question for Minister Steenhuisen. Looking at imports, such as wheat, importing half of South Africa's wheat from Ukraine and so on. Free State was once a province where we get a lot of our wheat. Are we looking at reviving any such industries, for commercial farmers that maybe had exited the industry, but also for emerging farmers in those provinces so that we do boost and diversify our agricultural exports? We did see that boost in the first quarter of the year in both jobs and the exports. So just keeping that momentum, what are we doing in context of the tariffs? Thank you.
Thanks. If we'll allow Minister Steenhuisen and his team to answer those questions. I know there was a question directed specifically to Minister Tau. Minister, if you'd like to defer to one of your DDGs also, we'll accept that. But Minister Steenhuisen, over to you and your team, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that the self-lift, self-ban was an initial response to one of what the US have regarded as a non-trade barrier to access, particularly for poultry in South Africa. And it was one of the issues that was raised quite strongly with us by the US TR and has come up repeatedly in interactions with the United States of America. I believe that the self-ban, self-lift program that we've offered them removes any concerns that avian flu could be used as a trade barrier to prevent the US of reaching their quota that is designated to them into South Africa. I think it is a fair system. I think it is a system that quite adequately addresses the concerns around that. On the issue of pork, there's ongoing discussions around pork. Our animal scientists maintain that there is a risk of PRRS disease in South Africa if it was to outbreak here. So we require on certain cuts for the glands to be removed from pork cuts to prevent the exposure to the disease. One of the reasons that we do this is because our own pork sector in South Africa is incredibly small and generally is only geared towards domestic production. We do very little export of pork outside of South Africa. And so if our own pork sector was to be wiped out through an outbreak of PRRS disease, that we would see significant food security problems in the country. And that's why we require that. It's not something that we've thumb-sucked. Our animal scientists have put on the table the evidence. We use and draw from WOA, who keep registers of where these diseases are prevalent. And I think it behoves us as responsible custodians of our own biosecurity to ensure, much like the US and other countries do, protect their local markets from potential outbreaks. We will continue to engage the US on pork, as Minister Tau has already outlined, but it would be incredibly irresponsible for us just to say, well, let's open up, because it would have grave implications potentially for our local pork sector. Nick, thank you very much. Yes, there certainly have been some engagements with probably the most senior US diplomat currently available to South Africa, and there have been issues that they have been talking about. I would say that some of these issues were not raised with us by the USTR or certainly in the White House, and have come as somewhat of a surprise, given the fact that we felt we were in a trade negotiation and a tariff negotiation. And we would obviously continue to engage the White House, but there are some other issues that are outside of Minister Tau and Ma's remit and belong firmly in the DIRCO space. And I know that DIRCO, through Minister Lamola, is engaging with his counterparts. As Minister Tau said, we've put together a very high-level team, joint team from agriculture, including our DG, DG Ramasodi, who will be leading the team from our side, to go and engage the United States on a number of these issues, around the trade issue and around the animal and phytosanitary. But some of those other issues are going to have to be a subject of DIRCO and diplomatic engagements with Washington. We also have a trade attaché in Washington. We sent, when we realized we were heading into choppy waters with the US, we deployed a very senior member of our department as an agricultural attaché in Washington. Dr. Jafta has dealt and headed up our plant unit for many, many years. He's experienced, he understands issues, and he's committed to sitting with US counterparts to be able to deal with some of the phytosanitary issues that cut both ways. Minister Tau will deal with the support desk. When it comes to wheat, we've had a very good crop of wheat this year, but we will still remain a net importer of wheat in South Africa. Obviously, we're looking at ways to boost production. It's not an easy crop, and given the fluctuation in prices, in the wheat price, it is often seen as too volatile for farmers to plant, given the fact that there's less volatility in things like maize, because there are other avenues to use maize. You can direct it either through consumption, milling, or for animal feed. And so you have more price points where you're able to do maize. Wheat is slightly different. We have seen an uptick in wheat production, and we will continue as Department of Agriculture to promote wheat, and particularly when it comes to emerging farmers and new entrants, to encourage wheat production. We also have seen a significant increase in barley production in South Africa, largely driven by the fact that there are significant malters that are moving into South Africa. As Minister Tau, I'm sure would know, Soufflet are setting up a big operation in Sedibeng shortly, and that's going to help for a guaranteed uptake for some of our barley products. But wheat remains a tough product, and as I said, the price volatility obviously makes it incredibly difficult to do this. I do want to make this one point, which I think is very important, and that is that trade with the US also benefits the United States of America. Many of our products are counter-seasonal, so they pose no threat whatsoever to US production. And when it comes to citrus, both the pricing and the quality of the South African offering, given the exchange rate difference and given the incredibly high levels of and quality of production in South Africa, ensures that what lands in the United States is incredibly high products that benefit US consumers and benefit US agro-processors. And I think that the US gets a good deal from South African agriculture. And it really, I think, will be a shame if we see a drop-off in these excellent quality products not being able to land in those areas. I also think that it is very clear now that these tariffs are not just around balancing trade. We've seen in a number of the letters that have been sent to various other countries, most notably Brazil and India recently, that these things go beyond just tariffs. And I think we're seeing some form of new era now where trade and tariffs are being used to deal with other issues outside of what would generally be trade concerns. And this is obviously a new normal to which we're going to all have to adapt. And as Minister Tau said, this is not something unique to South Africa. We have over 130 other partners around the world who are facing similar issues. We're also seeing that those countries are starting to come together to replace markets that have been lost. I shared last week with Minister Tau a deal that's been signed, for instance, between Brazil, who've been slapped with a 50% tariff, and Japan for the provision of beef. And I think we're going to see a lot of that diversification taking place. We are committed, as Minister Tau said, to diversification, and we're looking at extensive new markets where we believe that with the diversification, we're never overexposed on any one particular market, which ensure that we're able to sustain ourselves and our trade going forward much better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Minister Steen is handling the onset of the flu better than I am. And maybe we need to convince the president of what the doctors say, that bed rest is the most important thing to do when you have the flu. So there's a bit of lobbying to do there. And maybe, Nelly, to present it slightly differently, we went to Cabinet last week and got approval of what would constitute the revised offer to the US. Cabinet gave us an approval on which basis we're then able to engage with the United States Trade Representative on Friday through our head of the bilateral trade desk at the trade branch, who had already dispatched to the US, and they met with the USTR on Friday. On the basis of that, there was an agreement that we are now ready to submit based on the comments received and will be submitting today. Now, the trick is not to get the US to read about the offer in the newspaper. So please excuse me until such time that at least they've received and processed the offer that we have made. But of course, the work has been done, and that's why I took you through the process that we had undertaken. And I'm not sure whether that adds any bit of color, Nick.
Point of clarity, sorry, Minister Tau, Nick Wilson here again. So basically, from what I can see, I mean, the self-ban regulations, that's always been in place. Maybe, sorry, I didn't understand that. If you could perhaps just clarify that again. Thank you.
No, remember, this has been a process. So some of the measures that have already kicked in on the basis of our initial offers and engagements with the US are as a result of the process. So we didn't always wait for everything to be in place for us to begin to extend certain offers to the US. And that relates to, amongst others, blueberries, the self-ban, self-test offer, and other initiatives that we've taken, that we've put in place. So if you like, some of it is also goodwill on our side. You've raised these issues. We've started measures to ensure that we're able to address the issues that you've raised with us, which are your areas of concern. So I'm not known for much color. I'm not sure how much more color I can give you, Nick. Okay, if that's good enough, we could. With regards to the support desk, we've had various industries and companies of different sizes. So we've had, for example, the shipbuilding industry that has come and said, okay, these are the implications for us as an industry, particularly those that supply into the US market. We've had individual companies, some of them in the agricultural space, chemicals, and other exporters into the US market that have come and said, these are the implications and what can you do to support. Now, the monetary value can only determine on the basis of how you deal with individual applications and or issues that people engage with, because in reality, somebody can come and say, we are a citrus exporter into the US market. The implications for citrus are 1, 2, 3. And we could say to them that, there are alternative markets. We've got an arrangement with Japan, and when the president is there in the next 2 weeks, we'll also engage with them on this particular matter in terms of, on the basis of the preferential agreement we have with you, can our citrus now gain access to your market, and what are the issues that prevent it? So you might not have to come in with a monetary intervention in that situation. We're reflecting with Minister Steenhuisen earlier to say last year we resolved that, in fact, we're declaring a dispute at the World Trade Organization with the European Union with regards to the citrus black spot, because they had introduced it as a sanitary and phytosanitary issue. And we're saying, but maybe that process will be too long. Maybe given the changes in the trade environment, resolving it through a dispute resolution mechanism might not be the most ideal. Maybe it's time to go back to the EU and have a different set of negotiations about what happens to our citrus under the current circumstances. But it also comes with them making requests about what do we make concessions on that enables them access, because they themselves have been impacted by the trade decision. So it's all those things that we're going to have to balance. So you can't always put a number on it. The ideal is to always find alternative markets, reduce tariffs, improve access to market for all industries. And the financial injection should be if you like, a last option. But this would impact industries and companies differently, and we'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ministers. I'm just going to take a few questions from our WhatsApp group, and then I'll come back into the room after that. Pumzile, can I check?
All right, yes, we do have a couple of questions on the WhatsApp group. The first one is from Tando Mayeko at the Business Day, and she has two questions. The first one, as South Africa assumes the chairmanship of the SACU for the next year, how does the bloc intend to position itself in response to the US tariffs imposed by the Trump administration? What specific strategies will South Africa push to safeguard SACU members' market access to the US? And then number two, with regards to the discussions between the DTIC and the Labour Department, could we see the Labour Department reintroducing the UIF's TERS scheme for supporting employees whose services would not be used or terminated because of the impact of the tariffs? So I've got also two questions from Harja Omaji from the Business Day still. And she says to Minister Tau, can we fast track the exports to the African continent through the AfCFTA? And why is the next meeting only in October or November? And is it true that exports have increased to the continent in recent months? The second question from Hajra to Minister Steenhuisen, can we fast track the Agriculture Master Plan to transform sugar plantations in SA into ethanol and sorghum plantations to meet global demands? And then I've got questions from the Daily Maverick. I just want to go to them quickly from Michelle. It was mentioned that US demands are being substantially responded to. Can you explain in more detail as to what these demands actually are, be they political or economic? The high-level team identified from the DTIC and Department of Agriculture have been identified. When will the next engagement present SA's new offer that substantially responds to US demands? And then the last question, the DA has raised previously that the US demands have included change to domestic policies such as BEE. Can you please clarify as to whether these were part of the US demands? I think we'll come back. There's a lot more, but I think we can end it.
Thanks. Let's leave it at that. Thanks, Pumzile. I think, Minister Tau, if I can ask you to come up and address the first three or so questions, and then Minister Steenhuisen, the specific ones on sugar and those issues relating to domestic policy. Thanks.
Thank you. And some of the questions that had already been covered in some of our initial responses, but because I suppose they came in on WhatsApp earlier, the questions would have still been raised, so we'll try and manage around that. Yes, South Africa has assumed the chairship of the Southern Africa Customs Union since the 15th of July this year. In fact, we're chairing our first meeting of SACU this afternoon. It's an online engagement with SACU partners, and we've resolved that, in fact, we will put some of these trade measures and trade issues on the agenda at SACU to be able to engage on those issues. So on the basis of what SACU agrees, we'll then be able to provide a more detailed response with regards to what we're pushing as a bloc. Ultimately, when it comes to matters related to trade and tariffs and those related measures, it is important that we are able to go through the Southern Africa Customs Union as we function as a customs union. And we've agreed at the last session that was held in June in Namibia that, in fact, we've set in place protocols on how this would be engaged. And this applies to us in as much as it also applies to our colleagues in the customs union. The TERS scheme is still applicable. What we're engaging with the Department of Labour and Employment is how do we apply it under current circumstances. But as you know, when we engaged with ArcelorMittal, we also introduced TERS as part of the mechanisms of intervening there. So the Department of Employment and Labour still implements TERS, and of course we'd have to adjust on the basis of the current circumstances and what the implications could be. And yes, trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is continuing to improve, particularly as new protocols are ratified and new agreements are put in place to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We're having more and more countries coming on board and ratifying the protocol. So it's always important to understand that ultimately what happens with the FCFTA and with other trade agreements is that whilst you've agreed at a multilateral level, for purposes of implementation, it needs to go through your own parliament for ratification. And it is at that point that you can begin implementation. And we've recently gone to parliament and have had 2 additional protocols ratified by parliament. So trade under the FCFTA is increasing, and we intend to fast track it, including addressing whatever bottlenecks there might be in this regard. I think I've done mine. Just to say on the biofuels issue, it is a matter that we are also engaged with and would be following up with our colleagues in the Department of Agriculture, but I'm sure at this point Minister Steenhuisen can give an update in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Tau. I'll deal with the ones that were directed to us. But I would say we do also in agriculture see the African continent as a huge opportunity for us to be able to start improving the trade that we do. Particularly the wine sector has identified Africa as a growth market for wine particularly. And obviously the more protocols open up and the more corridors that are established for the movement of goods and services, I think the easier it's going to make us to be able to supply in and out of the African continent. Hajra Omaji asked around the biofuels and bioethanol and biodiesel. There's a huge opportunity for South Africa in this regard, given the fact that many of the big industries, shipping and airlines, have said that by 2030 there is a 30% requirement for biodiesel and biofuels. This obviously positions our sugar industry incredibly well towards that, and diversification is part of the sugar master plan. What is now required is an engagement and process with both DTRC and Minerals and Petroleum Resources, Minister Mantashe's department, around developing a biofuel strategy and policy for South Africa that reacts to these demands. There's a huge opportunity, I think, as well, as we have to move towards cleaner energy for provinces that would be affected through closures, for instance, of coal-fired power stations, to be repurposed and refitted, for instance, to be able to process bioethanol, biodiesel, and other products, mainly as a result of sorghum, canola, and of course, sugar. I think that the sugar industry is well positioned and are very keen for it. We need to create the overarching broad legislative and regulatory framework for this to occur. There's already also huge technology that exists, and I have been in discussions with one of the large players in the fuel space, Sasol, who have the capacity and technology to be able to start moving quite determinedly into the biofuel sector. And it is one of the issues that we're working with the sugar sector to move towards. And I think that we would need to fast-track the overarching regulatory and legislative platform in order to finally allow that particular sector to go through. I think, as Minister Tau said earlier, the difficulty is we've had to sign an NDA with the United States of America on these negotiations. And obviously this means that it's very difficult to go into broad detail. But I certainly think, responding to some of the trade and tariff issues, this is a broad, generous, and open offer that I think meets the ambition criteria. And I think if one was to look at this through the trade and tariff perspective, I think this offer represents something that would be good for the United States and also good for South Africa. And I certainly hope that, we certainly hope that it will be received in this way in the United States. Obviously, the demands, as I've said already, both in Minister Tao and I's meeting with the US Trade Representative, as well as our meeting at the White House, the focus was on the trade and tariffs. It was not on domestic policy issues, outside of obviously what everybody saw in the public arena in the Oval Office, where rural safety was raised quite sharply. And obviously we've taken heed of that and are working together, both Agriculture and the Police Portfolio Committee, to look at what measures can be in place to improve rural safety so that we can provide that satisfaction on that issue. But certainly in the other meetings, the issues were focused very sharply on tariffs, trade, and ambition. And we have tried to respond to that. Obviously, there have been other interlocutors that have emerged on the scene who have different views and have said there's other things. And obviously, these were not formally raised with us, certainly in those two formal engagements. So our focus in this offer responds to those trade things. As I said in my initial remarks, there are perhaps other issues, but DIRCO and those departments are going to have to deal with those through the channels that are established between South Africa and the United States to perhaps explain some of those issues, perhaps indicate what we're doing to resolve some of those issues. But that's above Minister Tao and Ma's pay grade, I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Ministers. Colleagues, I'm going to take one final round in the room. And if we do have space for one or two more questions from the WhatsApp line, then we'll go ahead. Let me not prejudice anybody at the back there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this is a big round. 5, 6. Okay, 6 questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's Wikanyo, MDN TV. I only have one question for the Minister of Agriculture. I don't know if you have already answered or explained the matter regarding the steps that have been taken to protect the perishable agricultural exports that are at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2.
Thank you very much. My name is Kuniso from Creative Kuniso Online Media. I have two questions. The first question I just would like to ask from the Agriculture Department as well as DTI. Do we have any Plan B or C negotiations against the Donald Trump tariff? Maybe you were going to say you withdraw the exploration of land. Do we have any Plan C, B, or G on that, or that is not touchable? May rather the tariffs go on. Then my second question is that after hearing that the rural areas or the agricultural areas is doing good, but my question is that do we have any plans or do we have any previous practice we have done to improve the dignity of a rural person? Because it look as we go around to the rural areas, or there are even jokes about people from the rural areas, and you can even see the influx of rural people. They try to come to the urban areas to improve their dignity. Do we have any plans to improve the dignity of these people? Because I can hear that there is good production that is happening there as we are speaking right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Susumi Maizumi from Japanese daily newspaper Asahi. You've already mentioned about Japan, but this month, Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, will be held in Japan. And how does South Africa government intend to develop relations with partners such as Japan during this difficult time, especially negotiating with the US? And as you know, actually, half of grapefruits in Japan are coming from South Africa. So we already have like some kind of infrastructure about our trade. So how do you want to expand this relationship? And if you expect anything from Japan, please let me know.
Thanks, 3.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Francis Luagamachate from Progressive Independent News Agency. Ministers, will you say these South Africa-US trade negotiations are the most difficult ones, based on the fact that you don't seem to be getting to the ground and having some agreements that did end up going to the situation, or the popular phrase, stable but critical? And the second question is, as part of diversification, what are the new trading negotiations considered for China, and in which, which products will those be? Thank you.
Thanks for.
I think I was number 4. Good morning, Katlego Logodi here from the SABC. The first one is clarity on the team, the new team that is being put together. Can you just give us a sense of how are they, the makeup of this team? Are they going to be inclusive of those from DIRCO as well, as we look at approaching these issues? And did I get it right that this afternoon you will be submitting this new deal? Maybe clarity on that indeed this is what will be happening today. Again, Jan Togoso asked about the export support desk and the companies that are already receiving support right now. Can you please just get further clarity on the industries that have been, racing to the desk to try seek for support? Are we seeing a pattern of some sort? Which industries would find themselves vulnerable right now, looking at those that have already, approached the export support desk? And clarity as well on the BRICS. We know very well that there was a 10% that was threatened to be imposed on the countries that are members of the BRICS cohort. We are a country that is member of the BRICS. Has that kicked in, this new deal that is going to be presented? Does it factor that in terms of how you'll be navigating that one as well? Thank you.
Thanks.
It was just an addition to.
I have to
Just on the
discipline
clarity, on the thing,
colleagues.
we having the deal, but what does that mean if the tariffs have already kicked in? That was just it, to add on to his question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mpo.
Mpo from CCTV. I just wanted to find out, what is the department doing to diversify exports to alternative markets?
Okay, I think that one's been covered already. Last one?
Yeah, it's just the clarity as well. I've from ENCA, just on maybe any timelines. Have the US committed to maybe relaxing the tariffs if they give the go-ahead to the revision of what you're going to propose this afternoon?
Okay, bit of a mixed bag this round. Let me ask Minister Steenhuisen first this time. If you can come up and clarify some of the issues around the agricultural and rural areas, and the team as well on your part, and then some diversification as well. And then Minister Tau, you'll cover the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On rural infrastructure, obviously that is the remit of the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform under Minister Nyonso. But we see agriculture as a major player in that particular rural dignity, because dignity comes through work, employment opportunities, and business creation. And that is why we are so fundamentally invested in growing the agricultural footprint in rural areas. We see it as the primary means of creating employment and opportunity in rural areas, and to help build up that infrastructure. The challenges we face, of course, also exist in the COGTA space, water, sanitation, roads, and the like, which are a huge issue in those rural areas, and are becoming an issue for the agriculture space as well. The quality of roads, being able to move agricultural goods and services. I had a heartbreaking story of a group of women dairy farmers in KwaZulu-Natal whose dairy depot doesn't come to collect from them anymore because the roads have got too bad for their trucks, and they're not prepared to lose the money on tires and damage to their vehicles And this means that those ladies lose an outlet for their milk. And that's just one example. So the President has already announced through Operation Vulindlela 2.0 that it is now going to extend to local government. Minister Kondongwana has also, through National Treasury, started to embark on a process of ring fencing, particularly on the services at a municipal level, to ensure that a portion of that money raised through electricity, through water reticulation sales, is reinvested into infrastructure to ensure that we don't have the outages and the like there. It was certainly interesting at NAMPO this year that it's usually crime that's number one on the list that's raised with me. This year at NAMPO, it was largely around infrastructure. So we're working together with the Department of Rural Development, with COGTA, as well as Operation Vulindlela and agriculture. I think that there's a lot more synergy that we can find in ensuring that we ensure that those rural areas have the infrastructure that they need to support the economic growth that we're trying to stimulate and create in those areas. And of course, that then leads into safety. And I've already announced and spoken about the initiatives by the Department of Agriculture, or the Agriculture Portfolio Committee, and the Police Portfolio Committee had a historic first engagement around farm attacks, rural safety, and the like, that affect our biggest stakeholders in those areas, our farmers and farm workers. And certainly from my department, they're our most important stakeholders, and protecting them is obviously very important. In terms of Japan, I attended a trade visit with the Deputy President. I met the Minister of Agriculture in Japan, very impressive, deeply impressive young minister, and we have had a good discussion about how we could improve. Japan is a very important growing market for us in wine, citrus, but also from grains. And we are in the midst of negotiating a deal around maize, which Japan is looking for. And I see Japan as a huge growth opportunity for us going forward. It is obviously difficult negotiating when the issues that you're negotiating are not necessarily about trade and tariffs. And that obviously complicates things. And I think that's also why we've had this particular situation. But I also think there's a matter of volume and scale. As I said, South Africa is a very small exporter to the United States in their global terms. And there are countries lining up outside the USTR's door to try and get their deal on the table. And so that does complicate the timelines. And perhaps, in other countries where you're dealing with trade negotiations, it's generally one-on-one and there's a focus. Here we've got a whole lot of countries scrambling to the USTR to try and avert tariffs and the like. And so I think there is a bit of congestion, and that does complicate the timeline somewhat. So I don't think it's a function of us sitting on our hands, as some have alluded to. It's a function of the fact that there are processes that we are required to follow, and that other countries are also going through these same processes, and so we would need to do that. In terms of diversification, China is obviously a huge opportunity for South Africa. A 1.6 billion population, that's a lot of mouths to feed, and a lot of demand for agricultural products. I can today share that after the last visit that I attended with the Deputy President in China, and our visit as the Agriculture Minister to the GACC, we were given the protocol for stone fruit. Significant in a number of ways. It's the first time that China has negotiated more than one product with us at a time. It's usually they focus on one fruit type. We got 5 in this particular deal: stone fruit, apricots, peaches, nectarines, plums, and prunes. These are obviously, we hope to conclude now this protocol on the sidelines of the G20, the Agriculture G20 next month, and that will then open the way for stone fruit from South Africa into China. The next mission thereafter is cherries and mangoes, and we are already advanced in terms of the negotiations there, and I think that would open huge opportunities for us to be able to get those particular products there. Minister Tau has indicated that the low-hanging fruit for us, pardon the pun, would be able to redirect citrus that's going to the US now into the European Union. but that is going to require a negotiation in order to try and get around the citrus black spot issue, which we do not see as unsurmountable, and we believe that with the right phytosanitary safeguards, there's no reason whatsoever that the European Union should balk at being able to accept the citrus. Even with the 30%, there are certain agricultural producers who feel that they would still remain competitive in that environment. Particularly, I was with one of the largest avocado producers in South Africa last week. I went to visit them up in Limpopo province. They believe even with the 30%, we can still compete effectively on avocados, for instance, given the price that our competitors are landing them at, that we can still compete even with that. So what they're looking for is for us to continue the engagements around market access. And we will obviously continue those processes as through Dr. Jafta in Washington to try and conclude those opportunities so that we can see further growth going there. I just want to make one interesting point about BRICS. If one looks at the US's trade with Brazil, India, China, and other countries in the BRICS, it certainly dwarfs anything that we do. And so I don't think that it would be fair or right to penalize South Africa for being part of a regional bloc like BRICS, which obviously is our prerogative as a country. As I said, the US certainly does trade with all of those countries. Some of them have obviously been slapped with far more punitive tariffs than we have. India sitting at 50%, and Brazil sitting at 50%. And obviously, there are global dynamics now around trade that are going to make these waters more difficult to navigate. But as the old saying goes, you can't be sailors that curse the sea. We have to navigate the seas that are now in front of us. And this is perhaps the new way things are going to be going forward. And I think that it's even more incentive to do what we can to improve the relationship with the United States and to retain access to their markets. I think it's in their interests as well to have a good relationship with the most industrialized and largest economy on the continent, but also to make sure that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket and that we are looking determinately for other markets. China, Japan, the Middle East, South Korea, these are huge opportunities, I think, that remain untapped for us as South Africa. And perhaps this crossroads that we're at now with this particular tariff situation is now even more of an incentive for us to move more determinately towards securing these new markets for South Africa's goods, not only in agriculture. Obviously, I'm biased to agriculture, but Minister Tau's also got lots of things he likes to sell around the world, and that diversification, I think, is now going to become the imperative of certainly both of our departments in the short to medium term. Thank you.
Maybe to pick up directly from where Minister Steenhuisen left off, with regards to diversification, we've also agreed in Cabinet that we need to invoke the entire Cabinet in these processes of diversification. The reality is that the DTIC on its own, or the DTIC agriculture, and let's say the minerals and petroleum resources on our own would not be able to reach all markets at the same time. So part of our reality is that we kind of have to invoke all members of the National Executive to be part of the pool of people, and we would be able to provide the necessary technical support behind that pool of people. And we think that that would be a much more valuable thing to do than to expect us, as these departments, to be all over the show all at the same time. It's extremely, extremely difficult to reach all these markets. And I'm answering both the question with regards to diversification and also what markets are we targeting. Of course, we indicated that we have engaged with the EU. We had a summit with the EU earlier this year. We agreed to develop a clean trade and investment partnership. We're in the process of finalizing that partnership with the intention that it would be signed off in November at the BRICS summit between the two presidents. So we're working very hard to ensure that we're able to implement that. We also saying that where there are areas of, if you like, disagreement, and we made an example of the citrus black spot, that we should be able to resolve this on the basis of bilateral engagements with the EU, and would be pursuing that strategy. We've been to China recently. We've given them a list of the top 100 products. We've varied that list to now include more industrial products. We've presented a proposal with regards to specific areas of cooperation, and we've had commitments from the Chinese to invest in particular industries. So certainly we're talking to them. As indicated, we will be led by the president at TICAD in Japan, and the engagements on TICAD would also include bilateral engagements between the president and the prime minister at that side, including, of course, bilateral engagements with our respective counterparts. We intend to sign a set of MOUs at the back of historic trade relations with Japan. So it is a market that we're targeting. We have also received confirmation that we would have the Joint Economic Commission with Saudi Arabia in the second week actually, of September. And linked to that would be an engagement we'd also have with the UAE, so that we're able to open not just those two markets, but the broader GCC countries in the Gulf. So it's an area of focus that we're working on to ensure that we're able to deal with it. I should say that we had intended to include Qatar in this visit that would go into the Gulf, but the agreement now is that Qatar would be in South Africa and intend to have a visit to South Africa in end of November, early December. So rather than, in fact, including them in this round of engagements, we should be able to engage with them at the back of the direct discussions and visit that they would be having in South Africa at the end of this year. I'm just giving you a flavor of some of the markets. There are markets that historically we've had relations with, but the trade relations have not been very, very solid. And we're now extending engagements with those markets. Those would include Brazil and broader the Mercosur countries. We've targeted that. We've also targeted countries in the Asian region. So there are countries in the ASEAN region that we're targeting. And we've already said Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand would be amongst the countries that we're targeting on the basis of the engagements that we're currently having. We will continue to expand our engagements with various regions and countries. So I just thought I should give a flavor of the sort of work that we're doing on the diversification issues and enhancing market access. But we shouldn't underplay the importance of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. In fact, when we talk about export and having China, the EU, and the US as our biggest trading partners, it is on the basis of, in fact, them either as a bloc, the EU, or China and the US as individual countries. But if you look at our trade basket, Africa is the most important. It remains the most important market for South Africa. There's a Council of Ministers in September that would be looking at how we enhance the work that we're doing at the back of the AfCFTA, and we place particular emphasis in that regard. And sometimes you might not always relate to it because it is not big ships that move off ports that go into our neighboring countries. But you've got very established brands, retail brands that are there, and at the back of those retail brands would be the products that are on the shelves a lot of which come from South Africa. So in reality, this is a market that we consolidate. And the discussions that we've been having with our colleagues on the continent is how do we ensure that we're able to address what has been some of the difficulties in trade that we have experienced. What are some of the issues that impacted investors in certain instances? And there are stories that we know about companies that suddenly get increased tax requirements, increased regulatory requirements, and so on, that present as a challenge, but also new opportunities, expanding access to products that historically we have not imported from our neighbors, including, amongst others, oil and gas, as opportunities that we have that we have not fully exploited. So optimizing the work that we're doing in Africa is extremely important for all of us. Any plan B and C, we have so far engaged on the trade negotiations. There's no cabinet decision that says that we would want to review national policy or national legislation. So there's no cabinet decision that says so. And I do think that as South Africans, it is important that we reaffirm our own commitment to our own sovereignty as a country. The ability to make decisions on national policy and the direction that we're taking as a country is an extremely important point. And when countries engage us and say, we need you to change your national policy, we should not suddenly think that that constitutes a plan B and C, because then it means that before Parliament passes laws, it must consult another country. It's not a very sustainable thing to do as a country. So we need to preserve our sovereignty as a country. So to the extent that there would be engagements, this policy impacts trade, creates non-tariff barriers and so on. These have been matters of trade engagements and negotiations. Because we also go to other countries and say, yes, you have created access to our products, but you've got non-trade barriers that make it difficult for us to trade with you. So our products can't access your market because of these regulatory mechanisms that you have in place. And we engage with those as trade-related items, but to the extent that we say we're placing our ability to make sovereign decisions as a country, I think would be a high-risk decision to take. Are these the most difficult negotiations? Let's just say certainly unprecedented. Certainly unprecedented because historically you engage in negotiations at the back of globally established rules of engagement governed by the World Trade Organization. And those would include, amongst others, that tariffs would be governed by WTO rules. You would have tariffs in line with what would be most favored nations, and these nations would collectively qualify for a particular tariff under particular circumstances, and that what you extend to one, you'll extend to the other unless you have a free trade agreement or an economic partnership agreement, and that you don't take arbitrary and unilateral decisions. That book has been put on the side for now, and all of us are grappling with the reality of what we're dealing with. I certainly think that it would be a subject that we would engage at G20 amongst others, but it would certainly be a topic of engagement when we get to the Ministerial Council that would be held in Cameroon in March next year, which is the regular WTO Ministerial Council that's held. It certainly would be a topic to say, given these changed circumstances, what does this mean in terms of the World Trade Organization, the rules of engagement, and how do we adapt? And countries have to apply themselves. We certainly as a country have started to apply ourselves to what our contribution to that discussion would be. The expansion of the team, I should say that the team, ultimately, when put together, includes the presidency. We're also on the ground in the US right now. It includes the Department of Agriculture, it includes DERCO and the DTIC, and to the extent that there are particular areas of interest, we agreed that, in fact, we need to involve and include the Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources a lot more actively, because issues have been raised with regards to gas, oil, critical minerals, and so on. So certainly the departments would be expanded to include all those that are affected, and we get input from all of them. Will it be submitted today? Yes, it will be submitted today. As I said, we had engagements with them through our own representative who was there, the Chief Director for Bilateral Trade, who is in the US right now. We've dispatched him there to stay there until certain issues have been resolved, and we've had to have people acting in his stead in the department so that we're able to deal with these issues. The advantage that we have with him is that he was also trade representative in the US, a trade attaché rather, in the US. So he's got direct knowledge of the market, the issues, the environment, and so on. So he's there dispatched since the beginning of last week, and he is engaging actively, both at the level of the administration, but also as Congress resumes, it would also be at the level of the Hill, if you like, Congress, that would be able to engage with Congress and should be able to get value from those engagements. And to the extent that we would need to dispatch even the directors general whenever necessary, the ministers whenever necessary, point that we need to dispatch that. But as I said earlier, we're also dispatching this capacity all over the world to open trade and relationships with the United States. With regards to the 10% BRICS tariff, it has not been presented as a direct option yet. It was mooted rather. I would have preferred muted, but mooted rather, as a point that could be under consideration, but it hasn't been put officially on the table. Therefore, we have not factored it in as a number. At this point, we're dealing with the numbers that the US has published. I think, Camille, I've covered everything, and Minister Steenhuisen had earlier covered the other issues. Thank you very much.
Ministers, thank you very much. I am going to abuse you for 2 more questions. I'm going to allow one from WhatsApp. If there's any new questions, Pumzile, on WhatsApp, one. And I'm going to give my colleague in blue here the other one. And then that's it.
We have questions from Gwena Mashale from the Sowetan, who asks, how will the localization support fund be financed? What accountability mechanisms are in place? How will the block exemption for exporters be implemented and regulated fairly? And what safeguards exist to prevent anti-competitive behavior?
Thank you.
Good morning. It's Ndando Tsukwana from Bloomberg News. Just wondering, Minister Dow, if the DTIC has given consideration to raising the import tariffs it levies on India and China for the auto sector, just to stem or prevent flooding into the South African market, given the fact that the US tariffs does threaten to weaken demand for our South African autos. And then just one for Minister John Steenhuisen. The stone fruits that you mentioned have been granted access to the Chinese markets. Just want to confirm that will be tariff-free. Thank you.
Thanks. Minister Steenhuisen, if you can take the one that's been directed at you, and Minister Tau, the other 2, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Localization Support Fund exists already and has been financed through certain competition agreements that have led to investment in localization. So some of the public interest investments have gone into the Localization Support Fund. It functions as an NPO and as a governance system, and we have a mechanism of engaging with them with regards to the work that they are doing. And in this instance, we have engaged them to ensure that we're able to bring those resources and capability on board to implement the mitigation measures. But it's not limited to those. It also includes broader localization issues that need to be pursued and implemented. The block exemption will be published for public consultation, and the final design and conditionalities attached to the block exemption would come out of the public consultation process. But as we publish, we would indicate what would be covered in the block exemption, so we're not giving companies carte blanche. And we're also cognizant of the response on the other side, because remember, our trade partners would also be concerned that, in fact, and if we don't do it well, it could be perceived as enabling collusion. In this instance, it is about consolidating the efforts that we can put together to address the challenges that we have, but we also have to protect the competition environment in our country. So when we publish, those safeguards would be put in place, and of course, industry and stakeholders would be able to contribute to that discussion. With regards to Chinese and Indian auto, it is a discussion that we're currently having with the intention, in fact, of taking a less punitive approach, but rather taking a more proactive approach of getting some of those products manufactured in the country. You know that bike is already in the country. Many of them have expressed interest of establishing in the country. They are making contributions to the process currently underway to review the APDP, which is the policy framework on the automotive industry that we've put in place. It's currently under review, and they are making contributions in this regard. We engage directly with both their countries, but also individual companies about this and measures that would put in place. Could the measures include tariff measures? I'm not going to preempt what the actual decision is going to be in this regard. I think we'll get to that point at the point at which we finalize the revised automotive development program, so to say. So, development program. So it is our intention to accelerate the policy development process and related instruments in the implementation of the APTP. Who am I disadvantaging now? Okay. Thank you. So yeah, I think I've covered the issues around the auto. I should say that we spoke about the Chinese, but in the next 2 weeks we'll also be engaging with both Japan and India. You would know that Suzuki has had a great presence in the country right now, and we will be visiting, and they're exporting from India. So whilst it's a Japanese company, they are exporting from India into the South African market. So we'll be touching both the parent company and the company that's exporting into the South African market to see how we can cooperate and collaborate on the basis of seeking to attract them as an investor into our country. So we're not wielding the stick as a starting point. We start with the carrot and then balance it with the stick. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the stone fruit protocol was given to us by the GACC. It's going through our processes domestically, FOSAD and our phytosanitary department as well. And I said we'll hopefully sign that at the sidelines of the G20 Agri next month, which I think will be a significant step forward. As it relates to tariff-free, we are still obviously, after the announcement by the Chinese, are still exploring the avenues of the tariff-free and what it means and what the implications are. But Obviously, this is a product that the Chinese really want from us, and it certainly, even if there is a tariff, it would likely be an incredibly favourable one, much like the other tariffs that they have provided us with. We're obviously continuing to engage China on other tariffs, things like wine, etc., and what the implications of the zero import tariff would be for those particular sectors as well. But we're still obviously, I think, through DTRC and the other and DIRCO are still processing what it actually means around the zero tariff regime, and obviously we'll hope to make an announcement of it into the future. Thank you.
Minister's colleague.